I used to think birthdays meant something. That even if the rest of the world forgot you, the people you bled for would at least raise a glass. Maybe say a kind word. But that illusion shattered like cheap glassware the moment my daughter opened her mouth. It started simple. Balloons taped lopsided across the back fence. A grill I'd cleaned the night before. My favorite beer chilling in a bucket of half-melted ice. I didn't expect fireworks or a parade, but I thought, naively, that there'd be warmth. Camille had planned a little gathering herself, or so she told me. She'd invited a handful of her friends from college, all dressed in fashion that looked more New York runway than backyard barbecue. Angela, my ex-wife, showed up in a designer coat I knew damn well cost more than my monthly truck payment. The music was loud, the laughter louder. I kept my smile on, though it felt like I was holding up drywall with one weak screw. I stood near the grill, spatula in hand, flipping burgers I had bought, seasoned, and prepped myself. That's when I heard it. You fix toilets. You think that makes you a man? Mom's boyfriend owns 3 restaurants. Camille's voice cut through the chatter like a shard of ice sliding down my spine. Her friends laughed, some with hesitation, others without mercy. I didn't even flinch at first. I just turned the burger one more time, maybe hoping I'd misheard her. But then Angela chimed in from the patio, raising her wine glass like this was all just a scene from some reality TV show. You were always just temporary, she said, loud enough for the clinking of glasses to pause. Just temporary. As if I hadn't been there for every scraped knee, every late-night stomach bug, every parent-teacher conference she didn't feel like attending. As if I hadn't installed every pipe in the goddamn house, paid half the mortgage, and made sure Camille's first car had working brakes before she ever took it out. That was the punchline. And apparently, the joke was me. I looked at Camille, my daughter, or the version of her that used to sit cross-legged in the garage while I rebuilt old car engines. Her eyes didn't meet mine. She just kept scrolling through her phone, her manicured nails tapping the screen like I was background noise. I didn't shout. I didn't throw the spatula or smash a plate or storm across the yard demanding respect. No, that's not who I am. That's not who I've ever been. I flipped the grill off, set the spatula down gently, wiped my hands on the apron I'd worn like some clueless dad character in a sitcom that nobody really respects. Then I walked through the back door, climbed the stairs of a house I used to call home, and entered the guest room where I kept a change of clothes. Just in case. My bag was packed in under 10 minutes. Toothbrush, razor, work boots. The flannel shirt Camille gave me 3 birthdays ago, back when she still called me her hero. I stood in that quiet room for a few more seconds, breathing it in. The faint scent of vanilla from the candle Angela always lit. The picture on the dresser of the 3 of us at the county fair, back when we still smiled like we meant it. I didn't take the photo. I walked out without a word. Down the stairs. Past the laughter. Past the second round of jokes I knew would get worse after I left. I didn't slam the door. Just pulled it shut behind me, like closing the last chapter of a book no one bothered to finish. 30 minutes later, I had driven far enough that the streetlights looked different. I pulled over at a rest stop, finally checked my phone, and saw it. 29 missed calls. 12 from Camille. 8 from Angela. The rest from people I hadn't heard from in years, probably alerted by the drama making its rounds in their little circles. But by then, I was already gone. Gone, not broken. Gone, not defeated. Just done pretending that being quiet and reliable made me disposable. Just done letting people mistake my patience for permission. They laughed at a plumber. But they forgot one thing. Plumbers don't just fix what's broken. We know how to stop a leak before the whole damn house floods. And this was just the first drip. Ramon's couch was old, overstuffed, and probably hadn't been vacuumed since the Obama administration, but that night, it felt like a king's throne. He tossed me a pillow, handed over a cold beer, and didn't ask a single question. That's the thing about real friends. They know when silence says more than sympathy. You want the spare room, or are we doing this the broke college roommate way? He asked, cracking his own beer. Spare room, I muttered. But I'm not here to hide. He raised an eyebrow. Didn't think you were. I wasn't. I didn't leave that house to lick my wounds. I left because I realized I'd been bleeding for people who didn't care if I ever got stitched back up. By the next morning, I was up before sunrise. Muscle memory kicked in. I made coffee, black, and ate a banana while staring at the list of job appointments I'd booked through the week. Ramon shuffled into the kitchen around 7, yawning, his afro a cloud of sleep-deprived chaos. You're really working today? He asked, rubbing his eyes. Yeah, I said. Because sitting here doing nothing won't build me a future. And I meant it. I climbed into my truck, the one they'd laughed at like it was a rust bucket. What they didn't know was that every ding, every mile on the odometer, every wrench in the back seat had built the life they so casually dismissed. I didn't need a showroom car or a LinkedIn bio packed with buzzwords. I built things that worked. I fixed what people broke. Not just pipes and toilets, homes, relationships, memories. That night at the party, when Camille looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her Louboutins, I didn't see a daughter. I saw a stranger wearing her face. And still it hurt. Not because I needed her praise, but because I'd raised her since she was 5. I taught her how to ride a bike, how to stand up to bullies, how to change a flat tire. She used to beg me to come outside and work on the Mustang we rebuilt together. She'd call me Dad, like it was the only name that mattered. No? Now I was the plumber she joked about. But what none of them knew, what I had never needed to say, was that while they spent money to show off, I saved. I invested. Quietly. Methodically. I skipped vacations, cooked my own meals, drove the same truck for 12 years, and tucked away every extra dollar I could. Angela had laughed at me once for opening a second savings account. Saving for what? A golden wrench, she'd snorted. No. I was saving for freedom. Angela had chased image like it was a prize she could display in a glass case. Everything had to be curated, down to the matching outfits for Christmas photos. I went along with it because I thought I was being a good husband. Because I believed that showing up was enough. Turns out, presence doesn't matter if people are only measuring your worth by what brand stitched on your collar. I stopped for lunch at a taco truck just outside a hardware supply store. The owner, Mr. Alvarez, gave me my usual 2 carne asada, no onions. Haven't seen you in a while, Cole. Everything good? I nodded. Getting there. He looked at me for a moment, then added 2 churros to the bag. On the house. I didn't argue. Just thanked him and walked back to the truck. The job that afternoon was simple, a clogged kitchen sink for a single mom in a small apartment. She looked stressed, 3 kids running wild in the background, laundry stacked like a fortress in the hallway. When I finished, she handed me a check, but her eyes darted to the total. "You're sure that's right?" she asked. "Positive," I said. "I don't mark up emergencies." She smiled, visibly relieved. "You're one of the good ones." I packed up my gear, drove back to Ramon's, and sat in the driveway for a moment before heading inside. That's when I realized something. They could call me temporary, disposable, a joke, but they couldn't take away what I built. Not the trust of clients who knew I'd never screw them over. Not the work ethic that put food on the table without cutting corners. And definitely not the foundation I laid beneath the flash and glitz they thought made someone worthy. Angela could flaunt her new man like he was a prize from a luxury catalog. But the real win? That was mine. Because while she was chasing status, I was building stability. And now? Now I was going to use that foundation to show them all what a so-called temporary man could really do. Not out of revenge, but because being underestimated is the best camouflage for someone about to change the whole game. Vin Danvers. Even his name sounded fake, like a character from a bad soap opera. He had this way of walking into a room like he expected applause. Tight shirts that hugged his gym membership, shoes that probably cost more than my month's supply of plumbing parts, and that ever-present smirk. The kind of guy who talked too much with his hands and never answered a direct question. Angela fell for him like a cliché in a romance novel. Or maybe she didn't fall, maybe she hunted. The moment he walked into our lives, everything changed. I remember the first time he came around. It was at some charity brunch Angela insisted we attend. Camille was glued to his side, all dimples and laughter, hanging on his every word like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs. He owns 3 restaurants, she whispered to me like that was supposed to mean something. He's a visionary. Visionary. Right. Back then, I bit my tongue. I'd spent years learning that sometimes silence was smarter than a speech. But just because I stayed quiet didn't mean I wasn't watching. I watched how Vin dodged personal questions, how his answers always changed slightly in the retelling. One day he was a former chef. The next, a food and beverage consultant. The day after that, a real estate investor. Which one was it? Vin. Angela didn't care. She ate up his stories like free samples on a silver platter. Suddenly, I wasn't being invited to family dinners. Camille stopped coming to the garage. And when I asked why, all I got were eye rolls and, "You're so negative, Dad." But negativity wasn't what kept me awake at night. It was instinct. It was gut. And mine was screaming. Ramon saw it too. He's been my best friend since we were 17, back when we worked construction together on the South Side. He knows people, knows how to read them. So when I mentioned Vin in passing, mostly to vent, he didn't just listen. He got curious. A few days later, we were in his garage, surrounded by motorcycle parts and the smell of sweat and oil, when he pulled up his laptop and spun it around. "You're gonna want to see this." I leaned in. Vin Danvers, full name, Vincent D'Angelo Danvers. 2 former LLCs dissolved under suspicious tax filings. A pending review with the State Revenue Board. Restaurants that opened and shut like pop-up stands. One of them had been co-owned by a shell company linked to a P.O. box in Nevada. No address. No contact number. Just a name and a reputation built on air. I sat back, jaw tight. "So the king's crown is paper," I muttered. Ramon nodded. "And what?" Everything made sense then. Angela's sudden obsession with charity galas and curated social media posts. Camille's turn toward designer labels and snide jabs. They were chasing the fantasy he sold them, a glittery, hollow dream held together by ego and lies. And I had been the boring, blue-collar backdrop they were eager to erase. But here's the thing about blue-collar guys, we know what's real. I didn't storm into their world guns blazing. No, that's not how you take down a man like Vin. People like him thrive in chaos. They twist it, turn it, spin it into another opportunity. No, what I needed was precision. Patience. So I did what I do best. I started laying pipe. Quietly. Strategically. First, I downloaded everything Ramon had found. Screenshots. PDFs. Public records. I started a digital folder labeled Vin's Fantasy. Then I called a buddy of mine, Nate, who worked in compliance at a small tax law firm. He owed me a favor. I didn't give him details, just names and dates. "Just keep your ear to the ground," I said. "That's all." He agreed. Next, I started watching Vin's online footprint. People like him can't help themselves, they overshare. Photos of wine tastings, blurry shots from nightclub VIP booths, a braggy caption about quiet deals with major partners. I saved every post, every location tag. I wasn't building a case. I was building a mirror, one I'd eventually hold up to the world. What burned the most was Camille. I raised her, fed her, taught her the value of work. And now? She bought into this man's illusion so completely, she couldn't even see how fake the threads were on the Emperor's new suit. But that's okay. Sometimes, people have to trip hard before they learn how to walk again. Vin was walking on a threadbare tightrope, and I was slowly sawing at the cord. And when he fell, he wouldn't land in my lap. He'd crash into the truth. I drove past the house once. Just once. Not to go inside, hell no, but to see what she'd done with it. To see if it still looked like home, or if she'd finally scrubbed me out like a stain on the backsplash. It was early evening, lights glowing through the living room window, silhouettes moving inside. I parked across the street, engine idling low, and just watched. It was Camille's birthday. 18. A milestone. I remembered the last one I planned, her sweet 16. Backyard strung with paper lanterns, custom cake from her favorite bakery, even rented a photo booth. She hugged me for 5 straight minutes that night, whispering thank you into my neck. That hug stayed with me for weeks. No, I wasn't invited. I didn't expect balloons or a call, but part of me, some cracked corner of my chest, still hoped. I looked up at the second-story window, her room. It used to glow purple from the string lights I installed for her, the ones she insisted on keeping all year round. Now the window was dark. The front lawn had been re-landscaped. The rose bushes I planted were gone, replaced by ornamental grasses and uplighting fixtures like something out of a luxury resort. The porch swing I built was nowhere in sight. The damn swing wasn't even good-looking, but it was solid. Sturdy. Like everything I made. And then I saw it. A new family photo on the living room wall, just behind the dining table. I squinted through the glass. Angela, Camille, and Vin, all dressed in white. Matching outfits. Big smiles. The kind of image you pay a photographer for and caption with something cheesy like New Beginnings. But I wasn't in it. Not even pushed to the side. I'd been erased. I leaned back in my seat, staring through the windshield. I used to hang our photos in that exact spot, vacations, graduations, that one random trip to the Grand Canyon where Camille nearly dropped her phone off the ledge. We laughed about that for weeks. Now the wall didn't even remember me. I checked Camille's Instagram out of morbid curiosity. At Camille Mercer. Except it wasn't Mercer anymore. She changed her bio, daughter of a boss and a queen. Not a plumber. Not a father. Just the sparkle of borrowed status. She'd unfollowed me. Blocked me, actually. That one stung. Angela went all in, too. I found out I was removed from the family group chat the hard way, when my number bounced off a group message thread about Camille's upcoming college orientation. Angela had updated the emergency contacts at her school, taking my name off entirely. No notice. No discussion. Just gone. Like I'd never sat up with Camille during her anxiety spells. Like I'd never held her after her first breakup, told her she was worth more than any boy who made her cry. Like I'd never paid half the tuition up front because Angela didn't want her look affected by student loans. She wanted me erased? Fine. Let her believe she'd succeeded. I turned the engine off and sat in silence. Pulled my phone out and opened a folder labeled Duplex. 3 years ago, I bought a rundown property on the edge of town. I'd never told anyone. Just quietly paid the contractor, filed the deed, and visited every few months to clean, patch leaks, and check the wiring. I hadn't touched it in a while, figured I'd rent it out someday or flip it when the market got hot again. But now? Now it was mine. All mine. I drove straight there. No music, no calls. Just me and the low hum of the tires against pavement. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, it was like stepping into a different version of myself. One no one knew about. One no one could touch. The duplex was plain. White exterior, chipped siding, 2 front doors, small shared porch. But I had the keys. Both sets. I picked one unit, the left side, and walked in. It smelled like dust and disuse, but not decay. It had potential. Like me. I dropped my bag onto the bare floor and flicked on the lights. Nothing. Of course. I made a note to call the electric company in the morning. Still I stayed. Pulled out a camping lantern from the truck and set it on the kitchen counter. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel like a ghost. This place would be my start-over zone. Not a retreat. Not a hideout. A workshop. A sanctuary. The place where the man they tried to delete would rebuild himself. One nail, one screw, one silent victory at a time. The voicemail came just after 2 p.m. I was elbow deep in a busted water heater when my phone buzzed in my back pocket. At first, I thought it might be a client rescheduling or Ramon checking in. But the name that popped up stopped me cold. Jules Marlowe. My heart stalled for a beat. Jules. My former stepdaughter. From my first marriage. I hadn't spoken to her in nearly 7 years. Not since her mother and I signed the papers and drifted apart like unmoored boats. Jules had been 13 then. Brilliant, quick-witted, all elbows and fire. And even after the divorce, I tried to stay in touch. But her mother moved states, blocked my number, changed schools. Eventually, Jules stopped answering. I figured she'd grown up and closed that chapter, the way kids do when too many adults let them down. But now here she was, leaving me a message. I washed my hands and leaned against the tailgate of my truck before hitting play. Hey Cole, it's Jules. I saw Camille's post. The one with the caption about her real family. I don't know what happened, but look, I remember you. Not how people talk about you, not what social media says. I remember you building me that dollhouse in one night because I begged for it last minute. I remember you sitting through my orchestra concerts even though you had no idea what you were listening to. You showed up. You always showed up. I just wanted to say, if you're not okay, it's okay to say it. But also, you're not the joke they're trying to make you into. You were the best part of my childhood, Cole. Just thought you should hear that. Take care. The message ended, but I didn't move. I stood there in the warm afternoon air, surrounded by the smell of old tools and copper pipes, letting her voice sink in like sunlight through fog. I hadn't realized how much I needed that. Not validation. Not pity. Just truth. Because lately, truth had felt scarce. Camille's words still echoed in my head like they were etched into concrete. You fix toilets. You were always just temporary. And Angela's laughter, sharp, public, merciless, haunted my silence. But Jules? She hadn't called to throw a rope around my neck or reopen wounds. She'd called to remind me that someone, somewhere, remembered me not for what I earned, but for what I gave. And suddenly, everything snapped into focus. I wasn't broken. I was buried, under layers of someone else's insecurity, someone else's ego, someone else's desperate need to be seen, even if it meant erasing me. But now I was digging out. That night, I returned to the duplex and sat in the living room with a folding chair and a takeout burger. No furniture yet. No distractions. Just me, my work-worn hands, and a legal pad. At the top, I wrote, "What they don't know." And then I started listing. Angela doesn't know I paid off her medical bills in 2016 when she pretended her insurance covered it. Camille doesn't know the second semester of her freshman year was fully funded by the anonymous scholarship I set up. Neither of them knows that while they mocked my trade, I'd quietly invested in 2 rental properties and stocks that now outperformed Vin's failing restaurant brand. I wasn't just a plumber. I was a builder. Of homes. Of futures. Of legacies. They'd let a smooth-talking fraud rewrite my narrative, but I was the one with the real pen. After I filled 3 pages, I leaned back and stared at the list. Not with bitterness. Not even pride. Just clarity. My worth wasn't in the clothes I wore or the car I drove. It wasn't in birthday toasts or Instagram bios. It was in the quiet things. The things that didn't need applause. Like the way Jules remembered. That's when I picked up the phone and texted her. Me. Thank you, Jules. Your message meant more than I can say. She replied within seconds. Jules, just telling the truth. You're still that guy. That guy. It made me smile. Because I knew what she meant. The guy who showed up. The guy who stayed up till midnight with a glue gun and paint, even after a 12-hour shift. The guy who didn't quit. And if I could be that for her, I could be that for myself. I didn't need Camille to remember right away. But one day she would. And when she did, I'd still be standing. Still building. Still being the man they once took for granted but could never fully erase. There's a certain peace in moving quietly. In knowing things others don't. I wasn't yelling in the streets, waving my arms around to be seen. No, I was laying brick after brick, quiet, solid, undeniable. They wanted to erase me? Fine. I'd build something louder than their silence. It started with the house. Angela had strutted around like it was her kingdom, decorating it with overpriced centerpieces and motivational wall art that made me want to punch drywall. Our home, she used to call it. But here's what she forgot. She never refinanced after I bought out her share of debt in 2018. The mortgage stayed in my name. I kept up the payments, every single one. Even when we started falling apart, I kept paying because it was still Camille's roof. Still her childhood bedroom. I wasn't going to let it fall apart just because her mother and I did. But now they'd locked me out. Erased me from the emergency contact list. Replaced my photos with a man whose real estate portfolio was as flimsy as a paper napkin. So I pulled out the documents. The original title. The payment statements. The notarized letter from the bank confirming I was still the sole mortgage holder. I filed a lien. Not out of spite. Out of principle. Angela could keep pretending the house was hers. But the day she tried to sell it or refinance it to help Vin open another failed brunch spot, she'd find my name waiting like a fingerprint on the foundation. Next came Vin. I called my tax lawyer, Dean Anders. Quiet guy, looks like a math professor who hasn't slept since 2012. But he's brilliant. I told him what Ramon and I dug up. Shell companies, closures, fraud allegations. He was skeptical until I sent the files. 2 hours later, he called back. This guy's a walking audit flag, Dean said. I'll forward it to the Financial Crimes Task Force we liaise with. Anonymously, of course. Of course, I said, sipping coffee in the half-finished kitchen of my duplex. Make sure they know he's recently been put down as a guardian contact for a minor at Ridgeview Academy. That one hit harder than I expected. Camille had written me off so cleanly, so quickly. She'd listed him as her emergency contact, like the past 12 years of scraped knees, late-night ice cream runs, and whispered thank yous meant nothing. But that was okay. I wasn't chasing a teenager's approval. I was protecting her, even if she didn't know it yet. So I made one more call. Mr. Langston, Camille's old ethics teacher. The man who used to hand me extra programs at her school plays when Angela couldn't be bothered to show up. He remembered me immediately. Cole, it's been a while. It has, I said, voice steady. You still run that mentorship program? The Real World Accountability Club? Yeah. Camille was in it for a semester before dropping out. She's not in it now. No. Angela said she was focusing on college prep and extracurriculars. Translation, image work. Well, I said, I've got something you may want to use as a real-world example. I didn't tell him everything, just enough. About Vin. About his shady businesses. About how Camille had fallen under his spell and rewritten her reality. Mr. Langston didn't interrupt. He just listened. When I finished, he said, send me what you have. I won't make it public, but I can make sure Camille sees the consequences of blind belief. Privately, constructively. That's all I wanted. Not humiliation. Clarity. I didn't want Camille to feel small. I wanted her to see how big a lie could grow if you kept watering it. That night, I returned to the duplex and sat in the living room. The walls were still bare. No furniture yet. Just a folding table, my laptop, and the sound of my own breathing. I opened the file titled Next. It was blank. Not because I had nothing left to do, but because the next move needed to be felt, not just planned. The truth was out there now. The lean, the investigations, the whispers. And sometimes, the best move is no move at all. Let the house tremble on its own. Let Vin sweat under the lights. Let Camille see the cracks forming where she once saw gold. They thought I walked away defeated, but I didn't walk away. I stepped back. And now? Now I was watching the house of cards they built begin to shake. The invitation came in the form of a smug text from Camille. Don't show up tonight. It's a family dinner. Family. She didn't even bother dressing it up with please. I stared at the message for a long time, thumb hovering over the screen. A week ago, I might have taken the hint. I might have let it slide, chalked it up to teenage anger, to her trying to impress the man she thought was the gold standard. But after everything I knew, everything I had, that text didn't push me away. It lit the fuse. The dinner was being held at some high-end restaurant Angela rented out for the night. Private room. Long table. Velvet chairs. The kind of place with low lighting, waiters who whisper, and a wine list that reads like a novel. I parked 3 blocks away and walked, my boots loud against the polished sidewalk. In my hand, a simple USB flash drive. Nothing flashy. Just truth, packed into 8 gigabytes of silence. I walked in 5 minutes after the appetizer had been served. The moment I entered the room, forks froze. Conversation halted. Angela was mid-laugh, wine glass in hand, eyes glossy from whatever story Vin had just finished telling. Camille's face stiffened like she'd just seen a ghost. Vin, ever the charmer, had that lazy grin locked in place, but I saw his jaw tense. Cole, Angela said, setting down her glass. This is a private family dinner? I finished. Yeah, I remember. Funny thing, I used to be part of this family. Vin stood, adjusting his jacket like that could shield him. Man, if this is about some bitterness, maybe we can talk outside. No need, I said, walking to the head of the table. I just have something quick to show you all. Camille's lips parted, ready to protest, but I held up a hand and turned toward the wall-mounted smart TV. Sleek. Expensive. Typical of Angela. Mind if I use this? I asked, already inserting the USB drive into the port. Cole, Angela's voice was sharp, but I ignored her. The screen flickered. First came a slideshow, clean, crisp documents. Public records. Business registration filings. Restaurant closures. The Nevada P.O. box. News clips. Everything Ramon and I had dug up and everything Dean had verified. Each slide was timestamped. Labeled. Unmistakable. Then the footage played. A shaky, zoomed-in video of Vin outside a dimly lit restaurant, exchanging a thick envelope with a man known for ghost managing shuttered properties. I didn't need to narrate. The visuals did the talking. The room was silent. So silent you could hear the fizz in someone's untouched soda. Angela's face went pale, her lipstick the only color left. Camille blinked like she was trying to wake up from a dream. Vin? He laughed. A weak, paper-thin sound. Okay, all right, he said, holding up his hands. Let's not get dramatic. Those are old files, taken out of context. Business is messy. Sometimes. Sometimes you use someone else's name to start a business, I cut in. Sometimes you skip taxes for 3 straight years and list assets you never owned. Sometimes you charm your way into a home built by someone else and try to plant a flag. I turned to Camille. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but confusion. Betrayal. She wasn't angry at me. Not anymore. Not in that moment. She was angry at the lie she'd been sold. This is ridiculous, Angela hissed. You're just jealous. You've always been bitter because you were never enough for this family. No, I said calmly. I was too much. Too real. And that made you uncomfortable. Then a woman at the far end of the table stood. Black blazer. Sharp eyes. Vin Danvers, she asked, pulling out a badge. I'm Agent Hollis with the state's tax enforcement division. We've been looking into you. I'd love to have a word after dinner. Vin's face drained of every ounce of color. His mouth opened, but no words came. He left the room 2 minutes later and didn't come back. No grand speech. No apology. No tantrum. Just silence. Angela stared down at her plate like it had personally betrayed her. I turned to Camille. I didn't come to humiliate you. I came to show you the truth. What you do with it is up to you. Then I left. No fanfare. No mic drop. Just walked out the way I came in, boots echoing against the marble floor, one man against the hush of a ruined illusion. By the time I reached my truck, I had no missed calls. But I knew they were coming. Because once you open someone's eyes, they don't stay shut. Angela's call came at 6:03 a.m. sharp. I knew it was coming. The only surprise was how early she decided to start screaming. I didn't answer. She called again. Then again. Then she switched tactics and texted, "You vindictive bastard. You ruined everything." What I had ruined, apparently, was the carefully stacked tower of lies she and Vin built like children playing Monopoly, except this wasn't play money, and there were real consequences waiting on the other side of that. Go to jail square. By noon that same day, she had been served twice. First by the IRS, thanks to the joint filing she never bothered to revise even after the separation. Vin's shady business dealings had caused a chain reaction, and since she shared assets and signatures on a few shell companies he convinced her to co-sign, she got caught in the web. Second, from my lawyer. A formal lien notice against the house. Certified mail. Properly filed. The house she said was hers. The house she bragged about decorating, maintaining, owning. She didn't technically own anything but the debt she refused to acknowledge. When I got the delivery confirmation in my inbox, I just closed the laptop and poured myself another cup of coffee. That evening, my phone rang again, but this time, it wasn't Angela. It was Camille. I stared at her name on the screen for a full minute, thumb hovering, breathing heavier than I wanted to admit. I answered. Her voice was small, not the confident, sarcastic tone I'd grown used to hearing in recent months. It was shaky, vulnerable. "Why'd you do it?" she asked. No hello. No preamble. Just that. I didn't rush my response. I leaned back in my chair, stared at the exposed beams in the ceiling of the duplex, and said what had sat in my chest like stone for weeks. Because you don't set fire to someone and expect warmth. Silence. Then, you embarrassed Mom. You humiliated all of us. I let that hang there before answering. I showed you the truth. If that humiliated you, maybe you should ask why lies were easier to believe. Her voice cracked. You made me look stupid. No, I said, softly but firmly. Vin made you look stupid. I just held up a mirror. I wasn't the one feeding you lines about owning businesses and being a big shot. I was the one who stayed up finishing your science fair project when you fell asleep crying because the glue dried wrong. I'm the man who built the life you lived in. You just didn't know it because I never asked for credit. She didn't speak for a while after that. I thought maybe she hung up, but I stayed on the line anyway. Then, finally, a quiet question came through. Was everything fake? I closed my eyes. No, I said. But you let someone fake take it from you. The line went dead. I let it. I didn't need instant forgiveness. I didn't expect a sudden reunion or a heartfelt apology. But I said what needed saying. And I meant every word. The next few days were quiet. Angela stopped calling. Probably on the advice of whichever attorney was trying to salvage what was left of her reputation. Camille went radio silent. Social media went dark. The party photos disappeared, the glamorous captions gone. Just a blank page where the fantasy used to live. Me? I stayed steady. I finished tiling the bathroom in the duplex. Installed shelves in the bedroom closet. Cooked dinner on a camp stove while waiting for the new appliances to be delivered. Everything I did was small, deliberate, honest. And then, a week later, a single message came through. Camille, can we talk? Just us. Just 2 words in that text that mattered. Just us. No Vin. No Angela. No crowd. Just a father and the girl he raised. I didn't reply immediately. Not because I was angry, but because I needed her to feel the weight of what she asked. I needed her to be sure. That night, I finally responded. Yes. Name the place. We met at a diner. Not a sleek brunch spot or some rooftop bar with exposed beams and imported glassware. Just a plain, old-school diner on Maple and 3rd. Red vinyl booths, laminated menus, a waitress named Bev who called everyone Han. The kind of place where the coffee is always hot, the pancakes are always a little too big, and no one's pretending to be anything they're not. Camille sat in a corner booth, hoodie pulled up, phone in hand, eyes scanning the window like she might run before I even walked through the door. I stepped inside and paused. For a second, It felt like I was staring at the little girl version of her again. The one who used to order chocolate chip pancakes and lean against my arm while drawing smiley faces and syrup. But the woman in front of me was different, hardened by pride, softened, maybe by truth. She looked up. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I echoed, sliding into the booth across from her. Neither of us spoke for a long minute. The silence wasn't hostile, just heavy. She stirred her iced tea with a straw. "I almost didn't come." "I know," I said. She looked at me then, really looked. Not through me, not over me, at me. "I didn't realize how far off track I'd gotten," she said, "until everything fell apart." I nodded. "That's how it usually happens. I thought Vin was, I don't know, impressive. Like, everything about him seemed larger than life. And you," she paused, "you were just normal." That word hung between us. Normal. I didn't flinch. "Yeah, I fix things. I don't talk about it. I just do it." She gave a bitter little laugh. "He made me feel like I mattered more because I was next to him. Like, by being with someone like him, I got to shine too. And now," she looked down at her straw, her voice quieter, "now I feel stupid." I leaned forward. "Camille, being wrong doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. We've all bought into something that turned out to be fake. What matters is what you do after." She nodded slowly. "I found the wooden car," she said suddenly. My eyebrows lifted. "The Pinewood Derby one." She smiled. "Yeah, in the garage. It was behind some old boxes." I held it, and I remembered everything. How we stayed up painting it. How you let me pick the color even though I spilled half the can on your jeans. How you didn't even yell. "You were 9, I said, smiling. I wasn't gonna yell over paint. She blinked hard, and I saw it. The tears she didn't want me to see. "I kept it," she whispered. "All these years. Even when I thought I didn't care anymore." "That car," I said, "meant more to me than most things I've built. Not because it won anything, but because we built it together." She wiped her cheek. "I messed up. I really messed up." I shook my head. "You're allowed to mess up. What you're not allowed to do is stay blind once you've seen the truth." Her gaze sharpened. "That's why you did what you did, isn't it? The slideshow. The dinner. You weren't trying to hurt us." "I was trying to wake you up," I said. "I couldn't let you keep building your life on lies. Not when I knew what the truth was." She sat back, letting that sink in. "Everyone laughed at you," she said, finally. "That night, at the party." "Me too." I didn't respond. "But you were the only one who knew what was real," she added. I gave her a half smile. "I fix what others mess up. Guess I did that again." She let out a breath. "I'm sorry, Dad." That word, Dad, hit me like a wave. It had been so long since she said it without sarcasm, without distance. It was real now. Honest. "I'm not asking you to forgive everything overnight," she continued. "But maybe we could. I don't know, have dinner sometimes? Or hang out. Just not pretend we're strangers anymore." I nodded slowly. "We can do that." We didn't rush the conversation. We didn't map out a full-blown reconciliation plan. We just sat there, sipping lukewarm coffee, letting a little silence say what words couldn't. When we finally left, she hugged me. Not tightly, not tearfully, just enough. Enough to feel real. Enough to start again. There's something poetic about silence after the storm. Not the kind that suffocates, but the kind that lets you breathe finally, fully. That's what the days felt like now. Still, honest. I woke up early, not out of anxiety, but because I wanted to. I made my coffee, sat on the front steps of the duplex with the morning sun warming my shoulders, and felt whole. Not perfect, but solid. Angela moved out of state 3 weeks after everything collapsed. The IRS wasn't gentle, and neither were the whispers at her weekly fundraisers. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was restarting her life in Arizona, trying to get a fresh beginning with someone new. She even changed her last name on social media again. Not to mine, of course. That part of her life had been fully deleted. Vin? He was indicted. Wire fraud. Tax evasion. Fraudulent business registrations. It made the evening news in 2 states. The same mouth that used to spew empty promises and shallow philosophies was now tight-lipped in courtrooms. Last I saw, he was wearing a suit 2 sizes too big and being escorted into a building with barred windows. And Camille? Camille surprised me. She started volunteering at a local food pantry. Not because anyone told her to. Because she wanted to. She texted me one afternoon, asking if I had time to pick her up after her shift. When I arrived, she was wearing an apron smeared with canned soup and peanut butter stains, her hair tied up in a messy bun. She looked exhausted and more herself than I'd seen her in years. Helping feels good, she said as she climbed into my truck. It's messy. It's tiring. But it feels, right? I nodded. Yeah, that's how you know it's real. She smiled. Like plumbing. Exactly like plumbing. That evening, we ate Chinese takeout on the floor of the duplex. She asked if she could see the second unit. I gave her the tour, bare drywall, a fresh coat of paint, new light fixtures I'd installed the week before. She walked through the space with quiet reverence, like she was starting to see the bones of the life I was building, not just the surface. This is beautiful, she said. Simple, but beautiful. It's mine, I said. That's what makes it enough. A week later, she introduced me to a friend of hers, Lex's younger brother, Ty. 19, fresh out of high school, drifting between part-time jobs. He's been struggling, she said. Wants to do something with his hands. Doesn't know where to start. I shook his hand, looked him in the eye. Show up. Be willing to sweat. Learn to care more about results than recognition. If you can do that, I can teach you everything else. Ty became my first apprentice. Then came 2 more. Word got around that I was hiring. Not just workers, but students. People who wanted to learn, who didn't need a fancy degree to prove their worth. I taught them what I knew. How to read a building's water lines, how to patch a leak without tearing a wall apart, how to treat a homeowner with respect, and how to leave every job cleaner than you found it. I called the business Mercer Mechanical. Put the name on the truck. Big letters. No more hiding behind modesty or letting people assume I was just another face in coveralls. That name meant something now. Camille's voice still echoed in my mind sometimes, her laughter the day she mocked me in front of her friends. But it didn't cut the same way anymore. Not because I forgot, but because we had healed. Slowly, authentically. The gala came out of nowhere. Community Civic Leadership Award. Apparently, someone, maybe Mr. Langston, maybe Jules, had nominated me. I almost declined. I didn't need trophies. But Camille insisted. This matters, she said. Not for them. For me. So I went. Dark blazer. Pressed shirt. Clean boots. I sat near the back, sipping watered-down lemonade, clapping politely for each speaker. Then they called my name. I walked to the podium to the sound of real applause. Not forced. Not pitying. Just honest appreciation from people who saw what I had built. Before I could speak, Camille stood. She wore a simple dress. No designer logo, no pretentious makeup. Just her, as she truly was. She walked to the mic beside me, took a breath, and said, "This is my dad." A pause. And he was never temporary. He was just patient enough to let me learn who he really is. The room went still. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a joke. I felt like a man with a name worth saying out loud.